Good morning, fifth graders. This is a special recorded lesson of your in person lesson that you were supposed to have today. It is on meter and music, and I hope you enjoy. So, my question for you today is why do we write music? Well, one of the simple answers could be that it helps you to remember a song, or better yet, to even be able to teach somebody a song. But you do learn music without having written music. We've been learning songs our entire lives without having to read music. Nobody taught you how to sing that song through written music from the radio. You just listen to it and you learn it. That's called learning by rote, and most of us do that naturally all through our lives. So why bother writing it down? Well, the reason is a little complicated, and we're going to talk about that today. But first, let's go over our I can statements. So I can identify and use simple music notation. I can create my own rhythms, and I can demonstrate understanding simple rhythmic notation. So in order to understand music, written music that is, we have to go back to the beginning. So in the beginning, okay, we've gone a little too far. So we're going to jump ahead from prehistory, like the cavemen that you see here, to ancient Greece. Now, ancient Greece is actually not the first place we find written music. That actually happens in Mesopotamia, and that's music that was written in 1400 BC, so over 3,000 years ago. But Greece is a great example of ancient music. Now, ancient music is something that is hard for us to be able to describe and to explain because we don't have a ton of examples of it. If anybody wrote something down on paper, paper doesn't last. It disintegrates, it gets damaged. So any paper records, there are very, very few of those, and they're very damaged potentially. So we don't get a full, complete idea. But we do have a lot of really good things. We have, as you can see, sculptures that still stand, like the Parthenon. We have pots and mosaics and other paintings that still survive to this day of ancient Greece. And stone carved music does exist. And those things have helped us to learn about the instruments and the music that they do play. For example, we have this lyre here, we have the karmaduzes, and we have this double flute thingy. And all of these things we've learned from paintings and from mosaics and from stone carvings. And one song that we can listen to is an example of one of those. It was the earliest complete version of a ancient Greek song, and we're going to listen to it right now. So, as you heard, that song was not that complex. It was actually quite a simple song. It had music, it had words, but it didn't really have the modern day complexity that we hear in our songs on the radio or in class. So, a song like that doesn't necessarily need to be written down. It could just be taught by rote. And in fact, most music back in those days was either improvised or done by that, taught by rote. You would teach the person the poem or the music, and they would be able to learn it on their own. The need for written music didn't really arrive until this guy here. This guy's name is Pope Gregory. Now, he was a pope in the Catholic Church, and he came up with these chants, these musical chants, we call now Gregorian chants, that were meant to be sort of sung by monks in monasteries to bring themselves closer to spiritual enlightenment. The problem is that Pope Gregory was in Rome, and the Catholic religion spreads all the way from Rome all the way into Europe and to Greece, and it was this massive empire. And it really was difficult to get information from one place to another, especially by word of mouth. So they had to write it down. So the first examples of our written music that we see in excess is examples of this kind of stuff, Gregorian chants. As you can see, we are beginning to find music notation that is very familiar to us. It has 5 lines, it has note heads, but there's not a lot else going on other than little lines connecting them and the words. So we're going to listen to a Gregorian chant right now. This is in Latin, which all Gregorian chants are written in. And let's take a listen. All right. So a lot like the Greek piece, it is rather simple. It's rather easy to perform. There's not a lot of rhythm. It's sort of just meanders around. But it is important to remember that this was potentially going from going to France or Germany or all the way up into Norway as far as possible. It would take forever to get to in the old days. So they needed to have a written transcript to send. So we go from Pope Gregory into the Renaissance period. Now, the Renaissance, or Renaissance in French, which means rebirth, was a time of great expansion, a time of expansion in the arts, in agriculture, in architecture, and in music. And one of the big things was, as you can see in this picture, people began to play music as a recreational and a social activity. So people would play together and they would listen to music together, and it was no longer just sort of a thing that you heard at the church. So music began to get more complex because you had more people performing it, you had more people playing on different instruments or singing, and it was for entertainment, so you wanted it to sound good. So the music you can see here is an example of some Renaissance music written out. We're beginning to see even more examples of modern music writing. We see stems on our note heads. We see that the notes are different. We have whole notes here. We have half notes here. We've got quarter notes. The notes go up and down with their stems like they do in our music. We have a clef here as well. So this is sort of the precursor to what we have as our modern music. And we're going to listen now to an example of some Renaissance music. So, as you can hear, the music is now becoming more complex. There are more instruments playing, there's more voicing, there is more rhythm and melodic movement. It is becoming more complex. So, we need something in like written music to be able to hold that information, because trying to teach 5 or 6 or 7 people how to play this one melody would be really hard, especially now that we have multiple parts going on. But music really takes its big jump into the modern world in the Baroque period, which is the next period we're going to talk about. The Baroque period came after the Renaissance, and it was a real explosion of music. Music jumped massively in its complexity. It became symphonic. You had groups of instruments that played by family and played harmony and had music like from Vivaldi, from Bach, from Handel, that showed just how complex music can end up being in the future. And now here's an example of a Bach transcript, and we can see a lot of symbols that we recognize now. We have our eighth notes, we have our quarter notes, we have a ton of stuff going on to show the musician what they're supposed to be playing at what time. And we're going to listen to a couple examples, starting with an example of Vivaldi and his Four Seasons. We're going to be listening to Winter. as you can hear, that is light years ahead of the last stuff we listened to in the Renaissance. It is so much more complex, and not having written music would be almost impossible to learn how to play that. So, why do we have written music? Well, because music is complex, and it allows everybody access to that complexity. So let's talk about written music, why don't we? So, music is written on a staff. The staff has 4 lines and 5 spaces, and we've seen staffs throughout our music career so far at Lemon Valley. Now, when you have a note on a staff, it tells us 2 important things. Either it tells us rhythm, how long a sound lasts, or it tells us pitch, how high or low a sound is. So, these shapes tell us what notes they are: a half note, a whole note, a quarter note, eighth note, 16th note. That tells us the length, where it is on the staff. How high or low it is tells us what its pitch is, how high or low the sound is. Today we're going to be specifically learning about rhythm. So what is meter signature? These are all examples of meter signatures, and meter signatures are super helpful for being able to find sets of beats. We feel music in different sets, and we're going to listen to a couple examples. First, we're going to listen to music that's in 2/4, then music that's in 3/4, then music that's in 4/4. And you're going to hear how each set is different. So the music that's in 2/4 sounds different than the music that's in 3/4. That feels different than the music in 4/4. Let's take a listen. All right, so that was our music in sets. So this, though, is super hard to read. Even though it has beat and structure, we can't really tell where anything's lining up. We don't know where the phrasing is. We don't know where the strong beats are. So we add meter signature. We add the meter signature. We now know that we have to divide up the music into these different parts called measures. Measure 1, measure 2, and they're divided by the bar lines. And we fill up the measure with the certain number of beats. So if this has 4 beats in it, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then 1, 2, 3, 4. That helps us to be able to differentiate the different beats. This is not that hard to read. We have our meter signature. We know we've got 4 beats per measure with 1, 2, 3, 4. And then this has 3 beats: 1, 2, 3, then 4, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And it helps us to be able to read the music out in its sets. Now, we always fill up that meter and the measures with different rhythms. And this is an example of the rhythms that we can use. We can have a whole note. We can have half notes. We can have eighth notes and quarter notes. And their division are as followed. So right now, let's go ahead and make a measure. So here I have some notes. Now, can we make measures yet? Absolutely not. We cannot make any measures because we don't know the meter signature yet. We've got to figure out what the meter signature is. And I'm going to tell you that today, the meter signature is going to be in 2/4. So that means 2 on the top, 4 on the bottom. So there is our meter signature. So now we can count out the measures. So let me go ahead and grab a line and let's begin. So we have 1, 2 notes. 2 eighth notes equals 1 beat. So that's 1, 2. So then we would draw the line here. Except we would draw it not in white, but in black. Let's try that again. So 1, 2. Then we have 1, 2. Draw another bar line. Then 1, 2, draw a bar line. 1, 2, draw a bar line. And then 1, 2, draw another bar line. And because this is the end of our little section, we're going to draw actually 2 lines. It's a double bar line. It tells you you've reached the end of the music. So there you go. That's an example of drawing out measures using our meters. All right, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed watching that video on notation. Hopefully you learned some stuff about meter signature, and you learned a lot about the music that helped create what we have nowadays in written form, all the way back to ancient Greece, medieval times, the Renaissance, and Baroque periods. Until I see you guys next time, go Leopards!